Right now, a lot of people aren't able to hold on to their real estate as property investors because they didn't use the 4-quadrant model: capital preservation, growth, yield, and tax. Welcome to the Urban Property Investor. I'm your host, Sam Saggers, here to help you crack the code of real estate wealth. Today's show, we're going to dig into some tax principles around real estate. Of course, the end of the financial year is upon us, and as property investors, we can claim some deductions because we are the nation's housing providers. So you are in for a treat. If you love the idea of tax, this show is for you. But of course, when I speak about tax, I am not an accountant, but I am a property investor. And of course, when I analyze anything about real estate, it's always around 4 quadrants. Quadrant 1 is capital preservation. Quadrant 2, will the real estate grow? Quadrant 3, am I going to get a good rental return? The final quadrant is the real estate tax efficient? Am I going to be able to get a benefit from the real estate? Now, of course, real estate investment is different to getting a real estate benefit, but when I analyze real estate, it's always about a 4-quadrant process. So we'll have a little bit of a chat about tax today. And of course, welcome back, my regulars. Thank you for tuning in to the show. You know the drill, play the program in double speed, get your life back. And of course, if it's your first time tuning into the program, wow, thank you for coming. We appreciate it. Become an urban property investor. Join me and become an investor of real estate. So if you're learning about real estate, or you are a real estate junkie, if you're an ice addict of real estate, then this show should be part of your listening shows, your podcast to listen to. So let's have a good chat about it. Today I'm going to dig into depreciation and why depreciation helps you hold real estate for a lot longer than not having depreciation on real estate. So I think the type of real estate you buy is very, very important to the type of cash flow you can produce from real estate. Obviously, when real estate has an age condition, it ultimately doesn't get the highest amount of rent it could possibly achieve. And sometimes real estate is a bit of a shiny new toy process, i.e. the new, better looking properties rent for a higher premium than the dilapidated, rundown real estate. That's just basic common sense. So when I look for real estate, I am always considering my 4-quadrant model: capital preservation, growth, yield, and tax efficiencies from the real estate. Because I lean into making sure I get good cash flow, not only from the rent, but also from the tax effectiveness of the real estate, I study what is known as basically functional obsolescence, or is a property obsolete because of types of obsolescence. And I never know how to say that word. Is it obsolescence? Let's go with obsolescence. So there's kind of 3 types of obsolescence that people can suffer from as property investors owning physical assets, which is, of course, property. There is a difference between real estate and property. Real estate is generally the land, and property is generally the inclusion, the dwelling. And of course, dwellings can suffer from physical age deterioration, economic deterioration, and of course, functional deterioration. They can go out of style. And of course, when a property's out of style, when it's physically run down, and when it won't produce the economic output you're looking for to grow your portfolio. And of course, the older a property becomes, the harder it is to ultimately get tax efficiencies out of it, because it may have already gone through its depreciation cycle. Now, depreciation is a 40-year cycle. It allows you to buy a property. If it was, say, brand new, you could buy that property and over a 40-year period, basically depreciate the dwelling, the property, not the real estate, in its entirety. And it really helps people who buy well and don't plan on selling. If you never plan on selling, then depreciation is a very good vehicle to top up your income. We'll talk a little bit about that. But of course, properties become functionally useless. And of course, that means they may have a poorly designed layout. They may have features and fixtures and fittings which are basically outdated. And I just had a valuer actually over at my house. I'm doing some debt restructuring. He was a valuer from NAB. Shout out to Lachlan, the valuer from NAB. If you are listening, thank you for coming over. But we were having a good chat, and he was saying that today, because of the cost of renovation, the big challenge for properties which are being sold is they come with a functional problem, because the person buying them obviously buys an old dwelling, but then has the headache of a high cost renovation to bring them up to a modern standard. And of course, there is a renovation gap in the market at the moment where really only skilled renovators and builders are the ones able to get into that refurb kind of marketplace because of the cost problem. And of course, if you buy a functional problem, you do need to solve it. It may not be needed to be solved year one or year three or year five, but if you are planning on owning the property forever, there's a point where you've got to solve the problem. So you're kind of delaying the inevitable that at some point, if something's not functional, you have to fix it. So I'm a big believer of avoiding the problem to begin with. That's my methodology. It's not the only methodology, but it's my methodology. Find a functional, good property which has the right level of functionality. And of course, we see this in the tech space all the time, don't we? Like the iPhone 1 just wouldn't cut it today compared to the iPhone 15. And so the speed of change in tech is a good example of what basically something becoming less functional is. And of course, we see it in cars. Sometimes you get into a car and you're like, holy cow, like this doesn't have navigation. Like, what the hell? So houses operate the same way, albeit the speed of change is a little bit slower, certainly than, say, the tech space. But if we don't have the right property, we're not going to be able to produce the right cash flow to economically prop us up in good times and bad. And of course, right now, a lot of people aren't able to hold on to their real estate as property investors because they didn't use the 4-quadrant model: capital preservation, growth, yield, and tax. Now, yield and tax can go side by side. You can get a high return and great depreciation benefits and tax deductions side by side. Using a little trick known as a PAYG variation, you can claim your deductions that you would normally get annually by owning an investment property. You can claim your deductions basically through your PAYG paycheck. And so you can claim your tax weekly, fortnightly, or monthly if you get paid weekly, fortnightly, or monthly. And so let's say you were getting a $15,000 tax discount and return, 15 grand coming back to you because you owned an investment property. Well, that's, or let's say 12 grand coming back to you as a yearly tax return coming back to you. Well, that's $1,000 a week. Sorry, $1,000 a month you can use. And so instead of waiting to the end of the year, you use it monthly. So we want a property with a good rent, and we want some tax deductions to allow us to get more cash flow. So we're less stressed in general owning an investment property. It creates less economic anxiety because there's less money coming out of our back pocket and more money in general to go around. And of course, that's the game we play. Now, of course, properties can become obsolete for all sorts of reasons, and a lot of them can be because of shifts in trends. Other things can be environmental impacts, which again, I'm obviously quite boisterous about, making sure you don't buy a property too old, and in particular where there's going to be environmental challenges and or even infrastructure challenges going to that real estate. We don't want the real estate that's cut off from the world at all. And of course, if the property's too old, it's going to also cause us drama, because what happens is when you have an old property, things constantly need to be replaced and changed and fixed, and it's death by 10,000 toilet flushes. And of course, the problem for property investors is quite often they will have an entry-level property because it's an investment, it's not their own home. And, the property they've bought may get a, lower end rent in the market, but because they've got an aging property, aging fixtures and fittings, to fix a blocked drain, it's the same price to fix a blocked drain on a $3 million house as it is a $400,000 house. And what happens is the problem with the lower end of the market is the rent often doesn't actually cover the cost of actually repairs and maintenance on the wrong, deteriorated, functionally obsolete, physical obsolete property. And so then you get this economical obsolete property, which basically has no return. So then you go back to the 4-quadrant model. You go, well, capital preservation, maybe I get a tick. Maybe I'm going to get growth, get a tick, but I now have no return. So I get a cross. And because I don't have deductions that basically create another proportion of my return because my property is too old to depreciate, I get a double cross. So I get 2 ticks, 2 crosses. That's not a good deal. And of course, this happens all the time inside of real estate, whereby people's rent just simply doesn't cover the ongoing maintenance costs to fix a property. And again, like, it costs the same amount to fix a toilet in a $3 million home to a $300,000 home. But the $3 million home probably gets a lot more rent. So that's the theory. That's how it works. And I've certainly got the lashes on the back from owning real estate that basically was a contingent liability based on constant repairs and maintenance. And you'll be surprised, the door handle falls off. Well, you got to send around someone to fix that. You've got, some shutters, they break. The flooring needs to be replaced. The electrical wires keep playing up. You've got power surges. Your roof starts to become a problem. All of a sudden, you're digging up your backyard and no one's paying you more for new gutters, new roofs, new fence lines, new piping. No one pays more for that. And that's why we have that saying, money down the drain. Like, if you are fixing a drain, no one's paying more for your house because you fixed the drain. It's literally money down the drain. So I've certainly seen it. You know, I've had some drain work on some properties I own. You know, one recently was $15,000 of drain work. $15,000. So all I'm saying here is put yourself in a position to win, not basically spin your wheels. So there is some assessments you can do. I certainly do them when I buy real estate. One is the current condition of the property. Two is a physical performance condition of the property. Like, where is the property going to break down? What's going to break down on the asset if I'm looking at it? Obviously, a dwelling age versus time horizon check. So if you're 50 and you're buying a 50-year-old property, when you're 80, you're going to own an 80-year-old property. And that could actually sink the amount of income you're going to get in your retirement age. So if you're 50, it may be better to buy a 0-year-old property or a 5-year-old property or a 10-year-old property. By the time you're 80 or 70 or 60, it's still got a lot of legs left in it. And of course, obviously, Australia is built through cycles, and there's plenty of renovated 50-year-old properties. They've obviously been fixed. These conditions have been fixed within them. So some renovations, though, are basically cosmetic and really don't factor in some of the real true things that need to be upgraded on a 50-year-old home. And things like electric wiring, plumbing, like for a lot of people who buy older homes, you know, one of the checks and balances you need to do is get a plumbing report or a mold report or a electrical report on the property, because again, like, it can cost you a small fortune to replace all of that stuff. And when you start replacing an older home, if you go too far with replacing, you're effectively going to need a council approval development application, and you're going to have to effectively work on that property to a point where it's up to modern day energy efficiency standards. So it can be very, very expensive, very expensive. And of course, this is why there's a trade of ultimately older secondhand properties which swap from an investor to another investor, but never from an investor to an owner-occupier. Because when owner-occupiers are shopping for real estate, when they see an old property which is falling down, they see a problem. Perhaps you as an investor see an opportunity, but if you cannot afford to fix the problem, you are stuck with the problem, and this is what happens. There's a lot of real estate traded which basically goes from the unrenovated to the unrenovated to the unrenovated, from the investor to the investor to the investor. There's always a lack of solid growth from party to party. So we want to assess, obviously, the age of the property, the physical performance of the property, the bones of the property. We want to look in the bones. We want to assess any environmental impacts, obviously understand the energy efficiency of the home. If we are buying an older property and we're going to need extensive renovation, if it needs too much renovation, you're going to have to bring it up to a 7-star energy rating efficiency, which is very expensive, very expensive. Obviously, the surrounds of the property, things like infrastructure, urban decay, livability decay, your neighbor's house getting worse and worse, no one renovating, no knockdown rebuilds. These are not good characteristics you want for an investment. So make sure if you are buying a much older property, you check the foundations, you check the roof, you check the plumbing and wiring, you check things like asbestos, you do an inclusions and shackles check For any antiquated features, you look into waterproofing and drainage. You obviously look into the layout to make sure it's not too outdated and what the cost would be to create new functionality around perhaps open plan. Obviously, you want to check old windows, doors, and how sealant works. You may want to get an energy rating report done on the overall real estate. So it's probably a little bit more than just talking to a handyman to whack down some carpet. And again, obviously there's cosmetic ways to make a property look prettier, but ultimately there is also the foundations of the property, the bones of the property, which are alarms for a lot of the marketplace, particularly a lot of the owner-occupier marketplace. So if a property has high operating costs and problems which are a ticking time bomb, they generally struggle to sell first. They become illiquid, and really the only people that buy it are looking for a project, not a home. So your volatility increases. And of course, if you hold those types of real estate, instead of being a landlord, you can end up becoming a bit of a slumlord. And again, I'm not a big fan of owning slumlord assets. I've had a few over the years, and I don't like it because you can't put the rent up on people. People are broke. People are half away from being broke, half a week rent away from being broke, and they're your tenants. And your property manager rings you all the time and talks to you about a repayment plan from your tenant, and it's not what I'm about anymore. I've been there, I've done that, and I didn't like it. I much prefer high income strategies in urban areas for real estate investment. High income strategies in urban areas for real estate investment. Now, I've got 13 cash flow hacks which I teach people to use in urban areas to accelerate their cash flow. I'm not going to get into them today. I think I've done a podcast on it. You can feel free to scoot around and see if you can find it. Maybe I'll come back and do it again. Nothing like a refresher. But really, in real estate investment, there's kind of two models of buy and hold. The first one is the BRRRR model, which is buy, renovate, rent, recycle. Now, the renovate is an important part. That is basically taking an old structure and making it new again. It's a very important part. What happens is people buy real estate using the BRRRR method, buy, renovate, rent, recycle, but forget one bit. They buy, don't renovate, rent, and then can't recycle. That's basically one model of buy and hold real estate. The second model, which is a model I use a lot these days, is really simple. Buy, depreciate, rent, recycle. So instead of renovating, you are simply buying a more modern property and depreciating the asset, because the Australian government allows for depreciation of properties if they are of a certain caliber, age, that conforms to the tax system. And of course, if you go back to my 4-quadrant model, capital preservation, growth, yield, and tax, because a more modern property allows you to depreciate, you can turn that depreciation into annuity. Depreciation equals annuity, which means cash flow. And again, there are some great reasons to look at the secondhand market. Things like sometimes the cheaper properties, beautiful established neighborhoods, beautiful character and charming homes and streets, and there is a lot of potential for renovation. Again, there is character suburbs and there is really broken suburbs, and there's a big difference in the secondhand established marketplace, as there is in really the new construction marketplace. There are ordinary areas where there's new construction going on, and there are community-led areas where new construction is going on. Obviously, the advantages to new properties is customization, modern features and amenities. Generally, you get building warranties that cover you for 6, 7, 10, 12 years, depending what you can arrange with the builder. Obviously, you do not have maintenance costs in general for at least the first 15 years of new construction. So you get a high yield and don't lose that yield to obviously the door handle falling off the door. Obviously, you get energy efficiency, which is in line with where the current country standards are. So you do not have retrofitting energy efficiency costs. And of course, you can get a higher yield because generally tenants want a shiny new place to live compared to an old dilapidated one that is uncomfortable to live in. There's obviously some drawbacks to new properties. Can be a little bit smaller. They can be in disconnected suburbs. They can be very homogenous. So again, if you're just buying new, don't buy homogenous, don't buy in disconnected areas, and don't buy a dysfunctional floor plan. So everything is in your control. That's the reality of it. And so sometimes the best, and this is something I use a lot, is really a blended model of the two. My preference for investment these days is generally character suburbs. So you get the best of those older suburbs, established suburbs, central locations, but then knock down, rebuild. Newer property in an older suburb basically is something that I really like, urban rebirth. I'm still a fan of outer suburbs which are community-led, and I think because of demographics and particularly the millennial boom at the moment, those outer suburbs community-led are going to do very, very well. But I'm also a big fan of inner suburbs which are character-led, but you avoid the downward spiral of basically an aging dwelling, which requires a lot of renovation. Just simply go new. It's just the way I do it. It's not the right way. It's not the wrong way. It's just a way. And of course, that reduces my vacancy rates, increases my return, makes sure that people stay a lot longer. And it's very fascinating, my tenant profile. Like my newer, more modern properties, the occupancy rate is so long. People don't move out. I never lose tenants from those assets. One lady stayed 13 years. I had to ask her to leave because the rents had gone up so much that her income profile no longer matched the rental profile. So it is a good way to consider real estate. So I'm always a believer in good improvements, bad economics, bad decision. So a good property in a bad area is a bad decision. A bad improvement in a good economic area is a bad decision. I'll say it again. A bad property, an improvement in a good area, a bad property in a good area is a bad decision. A good property in a bad area is a bad decision. A good property in a good area is a good decision. So that's what we want from real estate. Good dwelling, good area, good decision. It's as simple as that. Which leads us to the tax conversation. And I know it doesn't feel like a tax show at the moment, does it? It feels like a real estate show. Well, that's interesting. I'm a real estate guy. I'm not an accountant. But one thing I think a lot of property investors forget about is depreciation. What is depreciation? Let's go through what that is. Depreciation is effectively compensation for buying new properties and housing people in Australia because the government can't provide enough housing, so they incentivize you as a property investor to buy a property and induce demand and pay you basically a deduction from your tax return, which lowers your tax base, which usually means you've paid too much tax, which means you get money back in your cash flow back pocket that you can use. Depreciation is compensation basically for wear and tear. Buildings suffer wear and tear, as also do fixtures and fittings. Carpet gets wear and tear. The stove gets wear and tear. So depreciation simply sets out what you can claim per year by basically watching the dwelling age. And so every year the dwelling ages, more money comes back into your back pocket. So a lot of property investors just don't claim depreciation, and really the only reason is people don't tell them to claim depreciation. A lot of people don't know about it, which blows my mind. And of course, it's a massive perk of property investment. So the best thing about depreciation, it's a non-cash deduction. It's a non-cash deduction. So normally, to get a deduction, you might have to spend money to then get a deduction. So you might, for example, have a legitimate repair. You spend $5,000 on the repair. You may get a proportion of that deducted, or you may pay interest on actual cash in interest and be able to get some form of deduction from that payment. However, depreciation, you're not paying anything because it's built into the real estate. And so it's the only value proposition where you take an asset, a physical thing, and get cash flow from it, from actually watching it grow old. It's a non-cash deduction, which is pretty cool. And so when it comes to real estate, newer properties have basically more that can be claimed than older properties. And the timeline is 40 years from the time a property is born, and 40 years goes by, you, after that point, cannot deduct anything from the building at all, or the inclusions. You would have to renovate again to start the process. And so can you claim depreciation in older properties? Well, you can and you cannot. It really depends on when the properties are re-renovated. So residential buildings constructed after September 1987 can be depreciated. Renovations to buildings of any age can be depreciated. So again, like, as long as your renovation is kind of falls between, like, it's obviously renovations of any of buildings at any age can be depreciated, but if it's a 100-year-old renovation, it can't be depreciated. But obviously, if it was a 5-year-old renovation, it can be depreciated. So obviously, if you then look at the age of a property, say you bought a property which was born in 1988 and it still looks okay, doesn't need any works, the depreciator will look at how much that building cost at the point of construction. And, you know, a house might have cost 80 grand to build back then. And so the age will lower the depreciation rate of the home, because today the same home might cost $1 million to build, but back in 1988 it was only 80 grand to build. So the depreciation allowance is going to be less based on the time of construction. But of course, you know, homes which are older, you know, do still carry depreciation as long as they are built after 1987. So I generally, as a rule, just don't even look at properties built before 1987, i.e. 1986, 85, 84, 83, 82, unless they're a character home, but of course then you're going to renovate it. So that's how it works. And when it comes to newer properties, They obviously carry more depreciation because they were built in a different era and their clock starts differently. So you might have a property, for example, that was built in 1988 that is getting some depreciation from the building itself. You might get $1,000 a year from that building depreciation. You might then look at a property which is, more modern, and you could get $12,000, $13,000, $14,000 depreciation from basically the claim back on the depreciation process. So depreciation, a building depreciates at 2.5% per annum. So there's a big difference, and really the difference magnifies the more real estate you own. So if you own 5 properties and you're getting $12K back every year on each property, you're getting $60,000, which is a lot of money to start to run your portfolio. And it's hence why generally people who have a decent level of income use this strategy quite often a lot. And so the process, obviously, when it comes to the age game with depreciation, is really there's kind of 3 eras. 1987 and before that, forget about. 1987 to modern day, you can depreciate the building. However, in 2017, the government at the time changed the rules and said basically only brand new properties can depreciate fixtures and fittings, i.e. the stove, the carpet, and so unless that's brand new put into a property, you cannot depreciate it. If it's renovated and it's brand new, like you are doing a renovation, you can depreciate it. So basically, there's kind of the 3-era test. Now, let's imagine we bought a property which was 1987 and it's never been renovated. How much are we going to be able to claim back? 0. If we bought a property in 1988 or after September 1987, we can claim a little bit of the building. However, that building today only has about, 40 years from 1988. It's got 2008 is 20 years. So it's got 4 years left of depreciation allowance, basically. The 1988 property has 4 years left because 40 years will have gone by from 1988 to 2028. Okay, so it doesn't have much time left to go to claim that money. You might get $1,000 coming back from that asset. So then if we went to a property which basically is more modern, you're just simply going to get full building depreciation and asset depreciation. It's a completely different story if it's brand new. If you bought a property which has, for example, it was born in 2017, so it's like 7 years old today, it's still got depreciation till 2057. It won't get chattel or basically fixtures and fittings depreciation, but it would still get building depreciation up until 2057. So if you were to buy a property today in 2024, effectively, if you held it to 2064, obviously, you're going to maximize your journey of property investment using the tax system. So that's the process. That's why some people do buy, depreciate, rent, recycle. And again, there's no right or wrong. There's just the process, right? There's two processes. So I hope that's kind of helps you understand the models that are possible. Better assets have more depreciation. Basically, it's just the way it works. And but in general, my advice is, unless you're doing some sort of project or renovation, if you're not renovating, you don't want to renovate, and you don't even have the money to renovate, just avoid properties before 1987, i.e. 1986. Just avoid them, because you're not going to get a benefit from the asset, and it's probably past its use by date and will start to cause you problems. Obviously, a 10-year-old asset's, half the time very, very good. A 20-year-old asset, worth a look. Character assets from 1930 and so forth, work a look. But you got to renovate. You've just got to work out your renovation project costs. Obviously, an already renovated property always ticks a lot of boxes, particularly if it's done well, the right type of renovation, not just slapping stuff on, lipstick on a pig, so to speak. Just, you don't want that superficial fake renovation that's out there in the market. I get a lot of open homes, and there's a lot of fake renovations. You can tell the quality is just slapped together for the purpose of putting the property on the market, and the stuff's just going to break. And then obviously the modern marketplace, brand new, there's a science to that as well. Like, you want the good stuff, which is hard to find. So you don't want the mass-produced silly stuff, which adds no value to your back pocket. So there's some bad new properties out there. There's some bad old properties out there. You just don't want the bad. You want the good. And I think I'm a big believer in what I explained before. A good property but a bad area is a bad decision. A bad property and a good area is still a bad decision. A good property, which has a lot of life in it, longevity as an asset, obviously a good area is ultimately the good decision. I hope that helps you make better decisions, but I'll park up there. All right, folks, thanks for listening. Catch you on the next episode. Thanks for tuning in to the Urban Property Investor. To never miss an episode, make sure you subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app or on YouTube. And I would love it if you could give the show a rating and share it with your friends and family. In between episodes, you can always keep in touch with me by connecting on social media over Facebook, Instagram, or LinkedIn. Until we meet again on the next episode of the Urban Property Investor, take care and bye for now.